What up, Wizards? It's Dev. SBMTG, we like it at Magic, and I'm smiling. Today, it's a big freaking day, in case you haven't heard. Yesterday, Wizards announced a lot of things, like a ton of things. We got news concerning Modern Horizons 2 and Forgotten Realms cards, the D&D set that's going to replace the core set in Standard this season. And we got, like, historic anthology news about returning to paper Magic and events coming back. It's just a bunch of stuff to go over that we're going to try to cover in this video, but mostly with a focus on spoilers and previews for new cards, because that's what I'm most excited about, especially Standard. Somehow, for some reason, that's the format I care about the most. I don't get it either. I really don't, but we did get to see some really cool stuff from the Dungeons & Dragons set for Standard, so let's start with that. Well, we got to see precisely 5 new cards from Forgotten Realms, and I'll start with Power Word Kill, or PWK. Andrew WK is 2 mana, 1 and a black for an instant. Destroy target non-angel, non-demon, non-devil, non-dragon creature. Cool card, and I'm pretty sure that after Heartless Act and Eliminate rotate out of the format, this will probably be the premier 2-mana removal spell for black in the format, unless they get something better than this, but this is pretty freaking good. You know, it can't take out Goldspan Dragon and a handful of other targets. There's also the idea that this becomes the premier instant speed 2-mana black removal spell in the format, that maybe the Angels deck just gets a little bit better, if this is like the only played low-end removal spell in the format. Then Angels might have a chance, but still, I kind of doubt that. I think that this not being able to kill a Goldspan is probably the worst thing about it. But for the most part, for 2 mana at instant speed, this is going to take out just about every important target in the format. But speaking of removal, we got Portable Hole, which for some reason I feel dirty saying. It's just 1 white mana. It also kind of makes me think of Roger Rabbit. Portable Holes. But anyway, just 1 white mana for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value 2 or less until Portable Hole leaves the battlefield. So is it just me, or is this like unbelievably good for just 1 mana? I mean, I understand that you can't go any higher than 2 mana cost, and there are some things that like Glass Casket hits that this can hit. You're not going to hit a Lovestruck Beast with this. That actually really does matter, but just for 1 mana, any non-land permanent that's 2 or less, that actually seems like a really good deal to me. At again, just 1 mana, and you get an artifact on the battlefield that might matter for any number of reasons, right? So I kind of really like this little thing, and I'm not sure that you put like 4 of it in the main deck or anything, but you might see some amount of sideboard play or play in very specific decks like aggro or whatever that just have an interest in removing early targets. Also, if we have artifacts or enchantments in the format that are just 1 or 2 mana and end up being like serious headaches, we got this to take them out too. Also, I want to point out that a good target for Portable Hole is Portable Hole. I wonder how often that's going to happen. But I think you're probably ready for a big, dumb, fun, casual rare. So let's check out the Vorpal Sword. Just 1 black mana for an artifact, and it's an equipment. And it also has the line, a player loses the game on it. So maybe it's not as casual as I think it is, but equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has Death Touch. You can also pump 8 mana into this bad boy. That's 5 and then 3 black. Until end of turn, Vorpal Sword gains whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game, and this equips for 2 black mana. Alright, so 8 mana is a lot to make this go snicker, snack, and all that, however the poem goes. But anyway, I'm cool that the Vorpal Blade is like represented in a Magic card. I guess that's the coolest part about this. Especially the art that kind of looks like it's Alice. You see what they're doing there? It's like a Throne of Eldraine art. But anyway, I think that the card is really cool, right? And there are even some decks might want something like this. I mean, don't hit me too hard. I really don't think this is going to see all the play in the world, but it is a 1 mana equipment that equips for relatively little, that gives the creature a decent stat bonus and an okay keyword ability. And if you do have a lot of mana, if the game goes overly long for you or whatever, just put it on a creature that's difficult to block, or maybe you got something out that makes creatures unblockable. There's a bunch of ways to combo with this card. If you wanted to do that, right? There's a bunch of ways to make a ton of mana in the format right now. So I'm not even putting this card past seeing some amount of play. But at the end of the day, I really doubt this sees all the play in the world in Standard. But you can't really count out a card that says that player loses the game. That seems good. It seems okay in some situations. And I'm sure you'll see a deck or two here on the channel that's trying to make Vorpal Sword work. But now we get to look at what is not only my favorite of the cards we got to see from Forgotten Realms. It's not the last one we'll look at from Forgotten Realms. There's one more after this, but this is probably also pound for pound the card that will see the most play in the greatest number of decks. And it's also, again, just my favorite. Let's take a look at Prosperous Innkeeper. This is 1 and a green for a 1/1 halfling citizen. When it ETBs, you get a treasure token, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. I cannot wait to mess around with this little role player. This dude has so much to do in Standard. Even though Wizards didn't really give him any creature types that we could really work with, I'm not really that worried about it, you know? This does lots of stuff. You know, Wily Goblin saw a fair amount of play when it was in Standard. And that cost 2 red to cast. It was mostly confined to very heavy red decks. This can be played in like any deck with green in it. It's just 1 and a green. 1 of any color in green to get it down. And that's actually a really good deal on turn 2. You know, a treasure token is good for all kinds of reasons. Maybe you're trying to fill the battlefield with permanents of any type. Maybe you're trying to fill the battlefield with artifacts for a number of different reasons. Maybe you're just trying to ramp. That seems good. It's great in a deck with Goldspan Dragon because eventually you can cash it in for 2 mana, the treasure this creates. And it's just got like a Soul Warden ability like slapped onto it, you know, whenever you get a creature at least. You get a life. And that's a lot for just 2 mana. I'm not even really that worried about the, you know, Impassioned Order, Soul Warden, whatever you want to call it, ability. The gain life ability on this, I think, does have a place in Standard with so many, you know, things that trigger when you gain life. We have a lot of reasons to want to play this. And I've talked about Selesnya life gain possibly being a thing in the past during the Strixhaven previews. So, like, there is that angle to look at. There's so much to love about this card, right? A little bit of ramp, a little bit of artifact synergy if that's what you're looking for, body on the table, and you gain a little bit of life as the game goes on. And all this for just 2 mana. I think this is a great deal. It'll probably end up in a ton of decks, again, mostly as a role player and not a really powerful card, but there's a lot of good things about it. And I've already brought up Goldspan Dragon, but it's also a 1/1 for Lovestruck Beast. That matters. There's just so many little holes this fits into. That makes me like the card a lot. But let's look at the last card we got to see from Forgotten Realms, and that is Tiamat. Baby, this is 7 mana, 2 and then 1 of each color for a legendary dragon god. It's a 7/7 flyer. Check out those creature types. And when it ETBs, if you cast it, search your library for up to 5 dragon cards not named Tiamat that each have different names, reveal them, put them in your hand, and then shuffle that library. So I've already gotten in a couple of arguments on Twitter about this card. And I just want to go ahead and make it very clear that this is not a hill I would like to die on. I don't think this card is actually like incredible or anything, but I do think the card is okay. I think a 7/7 flyer that draws you 5 cards when it ETBs, a 4 for 1, is pretty good, you know, especially with Terror of the Peaks in the format. Maybe you already have your Terror down when you play this. You just zap for 7 and go get 5 cards. Like, okay, seems good. That's not bad. You know, it seems like it might be sort of okay in like Genesis Ultimatum decks, even though you don't get to cast them, right? You don't get to cast this card off of Ultimatum. You just get to put it on the battlefield. But I still think that 5-color Ultimatum decks are an entire possibility, right? We've got Triomes in the format right now. We've got the World Tree in the format. That makes it really easy to get a ton of mana. So as far as actually casting the card and ramping it into play, I'm not too worried about it, right? We got Cultivate too. So we got all these things that make treasures. We just saw Innkeeper. We have Goldspan Dragon, which, again, you might already have out. It may have already made a treasure for you, and if it did, it should be really easy to cast this. Or maybe you haven't cast your Goldspan yet, and this searches up a Goldspan, and a Terror of the Peaks, and a couple of other things if that's what you want. It can go get Changelings, again, if that's what you want. I've had somebody tell me that, you know, you'll only have 8 mana, usually at the most. When you play this card, you'll only have about 8 mana on the next turn. And first of all, that's not even necessarily true because you might not draw it until you have 9 mana, 10 mana, who knows, right? So you might not draw it until late in the game. But in case you do cast this directly on curve, you have no more mana left, you untap the next turn and you play a land, yes, you do have 8 mana, which means that you can cast Terror of the Peaks into Gadrak and go ahead and hit something for 5 and get over for 7 mana or 7 damage. That seems good. You can cast Terror of the Peaks into a Changeling creature, even if you wanted to do that. You could cast 2 4-drop dragons off of this on the next turn. Seems good. You know, I've had people tell me that this dies to removal, which is a really funny argument, considering they just reprinted Doomblade into Historic. Probably a lot of people are going to switch over to that spell, and this doesn't die to Doomblade because it's black. So there's that. Also, this doesn't die to the premier black removal spell that's going to be in this set that I've already shown you. You know, destroy target non-dragon creature. This doesn't die to that. It does die to Heartless Act. I will say that much, but Heartless Act rotates. Just like Emergent Ultimatum rotates, and all the other like 7 mana cards that just win the game immediately. those will rotate in like September. And then maybe a card like this is actually kind of decently playable. I'm not sure that it is until then. And of course, when rotation hits, we lose Terror of the Peaks too, which is probably the best card this thing works with at the moment, but I do want to try it out. Again, we're in a cultivate format. We're in a format with the World Tree and Triomes and all this stuff. So it shouldn't actually be too difficult to play a 5-color deck. And even though it does have a fair amount of opportunity cost to include it in your deck, you have to play a bunch of dragons. But, you know, we've got Goldspan and Terror of the Peaks. And aside from that, you really don't need to. Okay, you go get 3 other dragons. I get Terror of the Peaks, Goldspan, Dragon, and it literally does not matter what other 3 dragons I get. If you do take this out with a Heartless Act or any other removal spell, I still have 5 dragons in my hand that you haven't dealt with. You know, one of them's a Terror, one of them's a Goldspan, so figure that out, Jack. I just think this card actually does have something going for it. I don't think it's the best card in the world or anything, but I do think that when you actually do cast this card, it doesn't win the game on the spot, but it all but does. You know, even if the opponent has the removal spell for this card, again, are they going to have the removal spell for the other 5 dragons in your hand? That's hard to believe. So I do think this card kind of does win the game, even if it doesn't win the game the literal turn it hits the battlefield. But, you know, at 7 mana, you probably do have to win the game immediately. Like Emergent Ultimatum or something. But again, maybe when Emergent Ultimatum goes out of the format, things will get a little bit easier. But for the time being, I do want to point out again that we have Goldspan Dragon, we have Galazeth Prismari, that makes a token. Prosperous Innkeeper makes a treasure token. So it might not actually be too hard to not only get to 5 mana, but or 7 mana, but to ramp to 7 mana. And not be too tough to hit all 5 colors either. So I think there's a lot that I like about this card. And I think a lot of people are evaluating it in this weird mix of vacuum, not vacuum, where they're both saying the card is bad because traditionally 7 mana, 1 of each color, doesn't win the game immediately. That's how we evaluate cards. It's bad for that reason. But it's also bad outside of that vacuum because we've got cards like Emergent Ultimatum that cost 7 mana and win the game immediately. So you've really got to justify this putting this in your deck. I think those are really good arguments, but I also think that people aren't really looking at this card in context of what we currently have in the format that allows us to cast it, play it, all that, right? I think just the existence of Galazeth and Goldspan are enough to really make me look hard at this card. So I do like Tiamat, and I think it's got a chance. But of course, we also got to see some stuff from Modern Horizons too, and a lot of this is really, really interesting. Like, some of it is, you know, reprints of old cards, and then some of it's new stuff that I think is actually really worth looking over, even if I'm not the modern guy, right? But just in case you haven't seen this yet, you're living under a rock, fetch lands. In this set, not only will they be given the extended art treatment, but they're also going to be given the old frame treatment, and some of these look really good. Like Misty Rainforest in the old frame is... Oh, it's a gorgeous Magic card. But we also got to see some interesting things like Diamond Lion and Brainstone, both of these brand new cards. You know, Brainstone is like an egg and a brainstorm, hello baby, and it's got a weird face on it. It's just 1 mana for an artifact. You pay 2 and tap it and sack it to draw 3 cards, and then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. So you pay 2, sack it, cast Brainstorm is basically what this is. I think this is actually really good. I've already mentioned this in this video, but there are some decks that just want a bunch of artifacts on the table for whatever reason. You know, eggs decks are, at this point, a time-honored tradition in Magic, and having an egg that casts Brainstorm in a format with fetch lands is stupid. I'm fairly certain that's really, really stupid. So I kind of like Brainstorm an awful lot, and I think this is an important artifact. Manipulating the top of your library is really good in the modern environment, mostly because of fetch lands. So just keep that in mind. But Diamond Lion is 2 mana for an artifact creature. It's a cat. It's a 2/2. You can tap it and discard your hand, sacrifice it. You see where this is going. Add 3 mana of any color. Activate only as an instant. Only as an instant, ladies and gentlemen. They just had to keep the text, the Oracle text from Lion's Eye Diamond, completely intact. Although I guess you could... The original text from LED was only as an interrupt, if I'm not mistaken. But who cares? Anyway, this is Lion's Eye Diamond on a body. Problem is, it doesn't cost 0, it costs 2, and that makes all the difference in the world. You know, it's easily removable. It can't tap and sack until it's not summoning sick anymore, so there's some problems. there's kind of some issues. That said, I still think the card might see a little bit of play just because its ability's so busted. We also got Counterspell in Modern. All hail Counterspell in Modern. I love when they announce this. Adam Staborski, who I do love, just personally, he's I wouldn't say he's a great friend, but he is a person I know somewhat well, and I wish very well, and whom I do love wholeheartedly very much. He wrote the article, and he definitely made it sound as though since the beginning of Modern, the player base has been clamoring for Counterspell in Modern. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, Stibs, but still, it's interesting, if nothing else, that Counterspell is going to be Modern legal now. I think the format can handle a card like Counterspell, and honestly, I don't think it's that much better than some of the Counterspells we already had access to. I've been going around seeing people all day on social media talking about, like, oh, we don't have to play Mana Leak anymore, and it's like, have we learned nothing? You'll probably play both of them. Now you have access to three different premium 2-mana counterspells in Modern, because you also have Remand. So, and I don't know that Remand is going to go out of style anytime soon either. There were plenty of Legacy decks that played Remand instead of Counterspell, depending on how many colors they're trying to play. So, that extra blue pip might actually mean a great deal, but Modern has had plenty of decks for a long time that play like Cryptic Command. That's 3 blue pips, so I don't know that 2 blue is going to be a big deal. And I'm pretty sure Counterspell is going to see a lot of play in Modern. I don't really think that is a controversial statement. Modern also gets Sanctum Prelate in Modern Horizons too, and this is actually a really sweet card that's been kind of a force in Legacy for a while, but it's going to be Modern playable in Humans with Collected Company, and that's kind of scary. But in case you want to know what the card actually does, it's 3 mana, 1 and 2 white, for a 2/2 Human Cleric. And when it ETBs, you choose a number. And you see, non-creature spells with mana value equal to the chosen number can't be cast. How silly is that? It's just the first time you read this card, you're like, oh, that's really good. I don't want to play against that. And it turns out that Legacy players either hate playing with it, or hate playing against it, or love playing with it. And I'm pretty sure the same is going to be true for Modern. Here very, very shortly. I think this is going to shake up the format, possibly even more so than Counterspell, which might be a controversial statement, but I do think it's very interesting that these 2 cards came out on the same day, right? Just name Counterspell? That could be a thing that you do. But anyway, or name 2, I guess. But either way, yes, this is an extremely important pickup for Modern. Don't think anything less. But in my mind, the coolest card that we got to see like all day, standard or modern or whatever, historic anthology, whatever, the coolest looking card we got to see all day was Urza's Saga. And I actually think this has interesting implications, again, based on some of the things my buddy Stibbs wrote in his article for Wizards. But Urza's Saga is an enchantment land, you see, ladies and gentlemen. It's an enchantment land with the type Urza's Saga. It's got the same type as its name. This is one of the few cards in Magic history that is named after a set. But anyway, Chapter 1, it gains tap, add colorless. So the whole time it's in play, taps for a colorless. On Chapter 2, it gains 2 tap, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token. With this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So it at least makes a 1/1. And then, on Chapter 3, you search your library for an artifact card with mana cost 0 or 1, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. So, tutor for, I don't know, a Mox. Tutor for a 0 or 1 cost thing in Legacy, the 3rd chapter. So, literally on turn 3 if you play this turn 1. And that is pretty good. I mean, I imagine this is going to see some amount of play in Legacy, Vintage, and possibly Modern. Although this looks like the kind of card that the farther back you go, the more broken the format is, the better a card like this gets just because of the spread of options that you have for tutoring on the 3rd chapter. I am a little squeamish about playing a land that dies, that dies on the 3rd turn it's in play. Sometimes on turn 3 you'll lose this during your draw step, which is like really awkward. So I don't know about that much. I think that's a kind of a massive drawback to the card. And it only taps for colorless, and then like the 2nd chapter, it might take all of your mana if you're playing it on curve to create like a 1/1 or a 2/2. Like there's definitely problems with this card. Like I guess on the 3rd chapter, before it dies, you could tap it to create a construct token before it goes to the graveyard, which is I guess a play pattern you have to remember. But all things considered, I don't know that the card is that amazing. I honestly don't. I think it probably is good though. Very likely the card is good and has something to do somewhere. So there's that. But I more like the implications of this form of design. You see, in Stibbs' article, he ends up saying something to the effect of, we're going to show you the dragon's half of Dungeons and Dragons is represented in this set, and he shows off Tiamat. I'm sure there's other dragons in the set and all that, but he parenthetically goes on to say that we will address how the dungeons half of Dungeons and Dragons is represented in a later article or later previews and all that. And I think that there's a pretty good bet this might be how dungeons are represented in the Dungeons and Dragons set. Is maybe, sagas that are actually lands, have some effect on the battlefield for a few turns, free to play, so they're relatively small effects on the battlefield. But they kind of represent like campaigns or adventures or whatever like that for the time that they're in play. They represent the dungeon that you're exploring or the world that you're exploring or whatever. So I think that might be how they handle dungeons in the Dungeons and Dragons set, is that we'll see some of these, and this is kind of a breadcrumb to this sort of design. So maybe that's how it's going on. This isn't an official prediction or anything, but I think it'd be really cool if that is how they ended up addressing dungeons in the Dungeons and Dragons set, is to get more of these. Well, that's all the cards to look at for now, but there are a couple of little news articles to get through before we finish up here. Just remember that previews for Modern Horizons 2 start really May the 20th. Official preview season starts on May the 24th, but they're going to release some things through Weekly MTG on the 20th, so keep that in mind. But the thing I'm more concerned with, which is the D&D set spoilers, those are going to start officially, at least, on June the 29th, although I wouldn't be surprised to see some cards trickle out before then, so keep your eye on the spoiler pages and all that. But officially preview season for the D&D set starts on June 29th, and it'll be out on Arena not long after that, so keep up with the channel and all that. We will be covering all the spoilers for Forgotten Realms as usual, and I'm actually thinking about covering the Modern Horizons 2 spoilers this time around. Let me know if you'd be interested in that, because it's something, Horizon set and Modern only sets are something I don't usually cover, but I'd be interested in it if you'd want me to. So let me know down there in the comments section, not only how you feel about that, but just how you felt about all these cards today. What's your favorite of the new stuff, whether it's from Modern Horizons or from Forgotten Realms or whatever. There's a lot of cool stuff, even in a relatively light day of previews, to kind of talk about, right? Is Innkeeper as good as I think it is? Is Tiamat? Question mark? There's a lot of questions. So get down there and talk about whatever you want to talk about, so long as it's magic related down there. And I will see you in the sideboard, the comment section. Aside from that, do all the YouTube stuff, like the video, share it around so everybody gets spoiler action in their feed, and subscribe to the channel for all of the previews coming up and a bunch of Strixhaven content, right? Dank janks and deck techs and all that stuff. I was gonna do a deck tech today, but then they did this, so I think I'm holding off the deck tech until like Sunday, streaming in the next couple of days. Sorry, Stream Squad, I haven't been on stream like all week. It's been a weird week. We'll talk about it when I get on stream. But probably streaming like Saturday night if I had to guess. But in any case, guys, I think that's all I've got for this one. So just get at me in the comments section. Let me know how you felt about it, and I will catch you cats later. I am Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.